Newly released documents that were missing from the Epstein files contain serious, unverified allegations against President Trump. The Justice Department posted 3 FBI memos describing interviews with a woman who accuses both Jeffrey Epstein and President Trump of sexually assaulting her when she was a teenager. The White House calls the accusations completely baseless. CNN's Paula Reed is in Washington with the latest. And Paula, these were missing from earlier file releases, right?
That's right. And this individual was interviewed by the FBI 4 times. And initially, only 1 memo was released in that initial batch of documents released by the Justice Department. And that was an interview where she made allegations against Jeffrey Epstein, but not against President Trump. Now, yesterday, these additional summaries were released, and they detail the types of allegations that she made against President Trump, where she described being introduced to him. She alleges that he asked everyone to leave the room and, quote, mentioned something to the effect of, quote, let's teach you how little girls are supposed to be, and then describes an encounter where he pushes her head down to his penis and then told agents she bit Trump, who then allegedly struck her and said something like, get this little expletive the hell out of here. Now, in her
Trump, a man who used to rage post about Diet Coke at 3 a.m., went completely silent for over 2 hours on one of the most legally damaging days of his presidency. That kind of silence from him isn't calm. It's the sound of total panic. This wasn't a small glitch. This wasn't a server error. This was a man surrounded by aides who were frantically whispering about the 25th Amendment while senators measured the drapes in the cloakroom, all of them forced to stare into the abyss. Before we continue, please support us by subscribing to our channel and also liking this video so that you won't miss out on any of our next videos. The reason for the silence wasn't a bad poll number or a snub from a foreign leader. It was a direct, televised, almost Shakespearean warning from the bench. Imagine being the most powerful man in the world, and a judge you can't fire or tweet into oblivion looks straight through the camera lens into your soul and tells you point blank that your next home could be a concrete box with no Wi-Fi for the rest of your natural life. That's not a political hit job. That's a jail cell door slamming shut in the distance. Let's rewind to the exact moment the world went sideways. We're in a federal courtroom, and the air is thick with the kind of tension you only find in the final act of a courtroom drama. The subject matter is the ongoing, relentless, and deeply uncomfortable probe into the Epstein network and the alleged reach of its tendrils into the highest corridors of power. This isn't ancient history. This is a live-wire investigation into obstruction and witness tampering. On the stand is a witness who's been holding it together by a thread. But you know that feeling when a dam has one crack too many? You're watching this person, and the weight of it all, the threats, the secrets, the fear of what happens if they tell the truth, just crushes them. They don't just cry, they don't just whisper, they erupt. They scream so loud it will probably crack the varnish on the mahogany bench. The words slice through the legal jargon like a shard of glass. Trump gave the order. Boom. That's the sound of a political foundation turning to dust. The room freezes. But this witness doesn't just yell. Their body betrays them. They collapse. We're talking about a full physical shutdown right there in the witness box. The kind of visceral, gut-wrenching breakdown no amount of legal wrangling can spin away. You can't cross-examine a nervous breakdown. You can't object to trauma. Judge Emmett Sullivan, a man who has seen just about every flavour of legal chicanery the swamp has reached his limit. He doesn't bang the gavel for order. He doesn't call a quiet sidebar. He stops the entire machinery of the court to address the elephant in the room. Or more accurately, the elephant watching via remote feed from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Trump was watching this unfold like the rest of us, probably on a screen somewhere in the residence, seeing his entire legacy evaporate in real time. And Sullivan seizes that moment. He speaks not to the attorneys, but to the man watching the screen. The message is cold, precise, and utterly lethal to any sense of presidential immunity. Mr. President, the judge essentially declares, interference in this matter doesn't get you a slap on the wrist. It doesn't get you house arrest at Mar-a-Lago. Interference means life without the possibility of ever seeing the light of day again. Life. No parole, no deals, the end. That phrase, life without parole, didn't come from a cable news hit squad. It didn't come from a Democratic fundraising email. It came from the bench. It's the legal equivalent of a drone strike on your psyche. And what was the reaction from the man who built a brand on punching back twice as hard? Catatonia. That's the word leaked from aides hiding under their desks. Catatonic. Not furious, not combative, frozen, shut down. Because for once, there's no counterpunch. There's no spin. There's only the terrifying realization that the long arm of the law just wrapped its fingers around his throat. And here's the kicker. This was just the cherry on top of a melting sundae of chaos. The White House was already a powder keg. Before that witness even took the stand, the corridors were filled with the smell of mutiny. You had Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, physically collapsing under the strain of defending the indefensible. You had cabinet members, the very people sworn to carry out his agenda, openly sharpening their knives and daring each other to be the first to call for his removal via the 25th Amendment. You had Republican senators in back rooms not just complaining about the latest tweet storm, but actually running the numbers, counting votes, and whispering about whether now was the moment they finally cut the rope and saved their own skins. This was a full-blown governmental seizure happening on live television. So what set the fuse that led to Judge Sullivan dropping the hammer? It's a paper trail that leads right back to the heart of the administration's efforts to bury the truth.
About why she was even coming forward, because the statute of limitations had passed. Now, I do want to make sure we get in here the fact that President Trump has consistently denied any wrongdoing. In a statement yesterday, the White House described these allegations as, quote, completely baseless, backed by zero credible evidence.
The U.S. Justice Department has released documents involving President Trump that had been missing, suspiciously rather, from the Epstein files. They include FBI memos from 3 interviews with a woman who alleges she was sexually assaulted by then citizen Trump when she was a teenager. The president has consistently denied any wrongdoing. We should note that the inclusion of interviews in the Epstein files is not necessarily evidence of wrongdoing. It is an interview. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt slammed the release of the documents, saying in part, quote, "The total baselessness of these accusations is also..."
According to the evidence laid out in court, evidence the prosecution is holding up like a smoking gun, we're looking at payments. Specific, traceable money flows directed toward Mar-a-Lago. And those financial breadcrumbs align with a very specific set of redactions ordered by none other than the Attorney General, Pam Bondi. The AG's office issued directives to black out certain lines, to hide certain names, to make sure the public never saw the full picture. And now the screaming witness is telling the court that the exact text hidden under those black bars is the blueprint. It proves that Trump was not a bystander, but the architect of a scheme to tamper with people who could put him away. And let's not forget Kash Patel. He went under oath, he said his piece. But according to the prosecutors, he didn't just misremember, he lied. They are accusing him of perjury, holding up his sworn statements against the cold, hard data of the evidence log. When you have a witness collapsing on the stand screaming about orders, and you have a former official facing contempt for what the court deems as falsehoods, you don't have a conspiracy theory anymore. You have a conspiracy trial. Judge Sullivan looked at this mess, the redacted files, the suspicious money, the lies under oath, and the broken human being on the floor of his courtroom, and drew a straight line to the top. If I find out you pulled the strings on this puppet show of obstruction, Sullivan was saying, you will die in federal custody. Now let's be real about what this silence signifies. It's not strategy, it's terror. It means the lawyers have finally gotten through to him. It means they've shown him the actual statute, 18 U.S. Code Section 1512. That's the big one. That's the witness tampering and obstruction law that doesn't mess around. You mess with a witness, that's 20 years. You orchestrate a widespread campaign to silence people who can bury you with testimony. That's the rest of your life. And when a judge looks you in the eye and tells you that's the menu for the day, even the most narcissistic brain finally registers the gravity of the situation. The silence is the sound of a man realizing the game has changed from witch hunt to life sentence. Let's step back into that courtroom for a minute, because the details are what make this so unbelievably riveting. The mainstream media, bless their cautious hearts, were trying to figure out how to cover it without getting sued. They were hedging. The judge seemed to imply, no, stop. The judge didn't imply anything. The judge issued a preemptive verdict on what happens if the evidence holds. It was a threat dressed in a legal warning. It was based on receipts, on testimony, on the kind of concrete evidence that grand juries drool over. This wasn't speculation, it was a preview of the sentencing hearing. The day had started like any other in the bonkers year of this administration, meaning it was already on fire. The whispers of the 25th Amendment were louder than the official press briefings. The back-channel talks among Republicans about a removal vote had moved from the hypothetical to the logistical. Then the Epstein witness takes the stand. And people need to understand the scope here. This isn't a rehash of old flight logs. This is a fresh investigation into whether the current President of the United States personally engaged in a criminal conspiracy to silence people with knowledge of his potential crimes. That's the ball game. That's why everyone in DC was suddenly sweating through their suits. So the witness is up there, fielding questions from the prosecution and defense. The cross-examination is brutal. It's designed to break them. And it works, but not in the way anyone expected. The person doesn't crumble into a lie, they crumble into the truth. The agitation builds, the voice shakes, and then the dam bursts. Trump ordered it, and then physical collapse. A body hitting the floor of a federal courtroom because the weight of holding that secret was literally too heavy to stand under. That's not theatre. That's what happens when you threaten a human being so much that their own nervous system rebels. And Judge Sullivan, a man who has seen the depths of human depravity and the heights of legal gymnastics, realises the moment is now. He halts the circus. He calls a recess in the chaos. And then he addresses the man on the monitor. Trump is watching remotely, hiding frankly, and Sullivan makes sure the camera is a two-way mirror. I see you watching, the judge's tone conveys, and I want you to know the price of what I'm seeing in this evidence. Then comes the citation, 18 U.S.C. 1512. That's not just a number, it's a gateway to a lifetime of orange jumpsuits and cold meals. The response? 2 hours and 17 minutes of ghost mode. No rants about fake news. No claims of presidential harassment. Just aides running to Axios and Politico whispering the word catatonic. And that's the scariest part for the White House staff. What do you do when the boss goes mute? You start packing boxes. You start looking for a lawyer. You start wondering if you're going down as a co-conspirator or just as a footnote in the history of the fall. The silence is the exact inverse of Trump's entire brand identity. This is a creature who runs on grievance and noise. A bad news cycle is fuel. A court case is a rally platform. But this was a legal death threat from a federal judge. This was different. This was the kind of warning that makes even the most combative defendants realise they need to shut up or forever lose their chance to ever see a golf course again. The silence means the defence team has finally gotten the upper hand in the internal war for Trump's self-control. Don't say a word, they begged. Every syllable you utter is a gift to the prosecution. And speaking of gifts to the prosecution, let's talk about the Bondi redactions again, because this is the forensic knife that's cutting through the defence. Pam Bondi, the AG, signed off on hiding specific files. The witness, in their breakdown, told the court that the stuff hidden under those black marker lines is the smoking gun. It's the direct command from Trump. It's the make it go away order. That's the link. That's the connective tissue between the Oval Office and the obstruction of justice. And Kash Patel, he's the loose end. He gave testimony that the evidence now contradicts. If he lied to protect the boss, he's in the crosshairs for perjury. If he told the truth and the evidence shows the boss ordered the crime, Trump is in the crosshairs for life. It's a lose-lose for the home team. Judge Sullivan has been watching this slow-motion train wreck for months. He's watched Leavitt physically give out. He's watched the cabinet descend into a knife fight. He's watched the GOP Senate squirm. And then, right in his own house, his courtroom, a witness is so terrorised they collapse, screaming accusations. At that point, a judge stops being a referee and starts being a protector of the process. He sent a message that was heard around the world. If this is true, you are done. The silence that followed wasn't just a lack of noise. It was an admission. It was the sound of a defence scrambling. It was the sound of aides realising that the Teflon Don might have finally met a surface he can't slide off. They're not planning the next rally. They're planning for a succession crisis. They're looking at the 25th Amendment text like it's a survival manual. They're trying to figure out if they can distance themselves before the ship goes completely under, with the captain still frozen at the wheel. This is the moment historians will point to, not the election, not the impeachment. This day, the day a federal judge looked at the President of the United States and said, "Interfere and you'll die in prison." And for the first time in his gilded life, the man had absolutely nothing to say back. This is a full-blown governmental meltdown happening in real time on every single news outlet. This is the kind of chaos that destabilizes an entire government. This is the kind of moment that historians look back on as a turning point. And it all started with a single witness breaking down and screaming that Trump gave direct orders to interfere with the investigation. So what actually triggered all of this legal catastrophe? Well, it's pretty straightforward when you break it down. According to the evidence that prosecutors are citing in court, there are payments that were made, payments that went to Mar-a-Lago, and these payments match up exactly with redactions that were ordered by Pam Bondi. She's the Attorney General. The Attorney General ordered certain documents to be covered up and kept hidden from the public record. And the witness is now saying that those covered up documents are literally proof of Trump ordering witness tampering. Kash Patel testified under oath about some of this stuff. The prosecutors say he lied. They're calling him out for perjury. They've got evidence that contradicts his testimony. They've got receipts. So Judge Sullivan looked at all of this and basically said, look, if I find out you orchestrated this, if I find out you gave direct orders to your administration to interfere with witnesses in a federal investigation, you're going away forever. You're looking at life in prison, decades and decades in federal prison, gone from society. That's what the judge said. And the president said nothing. Okay, so let's actually break down what happened in that courtroom today, because the mainstream media is still trying to figure out how to even talk about this. They're being all careful and cautious, right? They're hedging their bets. Well, allegedly the judge suggested, no, stop. The judge didn't suggest anything. The judge threatened life imprisonment based on actual evidence that's already been presented. This is based on facts. This is based on testimony. This is based on documents. This isn't speculation. So let's walk through the actual timeline of today's chaos and events. This morning starts like any other morning in this administration, which means it's already absolutely bonkers. You've got cabinet members whispering in hallways about invoking the 25th Amendment. You've got Republican senators talking privately in closed-door meetings about whether they have the votes to remove him from office. You've got people in the West Wing panicking about what's going to happen next. It's just another Tuesday in Trump world at this point, another day of political crisis. Then the Epstein witness takes the stand. And look, people don't really understand what this investigation is actually about, okay? This isn't just about old Jeffrey Epstein stuff from years ago that everyone's forgotten about. This is a current federal probe into whether certain people, and I'm not even going to be coy about this, whether Trump personally interfered with witnesses who might have information that could hurt him legally. That's the real investigation. That's what's at stake here. That's why everyone's panicking. So the witness is on the stand answering questions. The prosecutors are asking them about payments, about communications, about who gave orders. The cross-examination is happening. Questions are being thrown at them from both sides. And then something breaks inside this person. They start getting more and more agitated. As the questioning continues, their composure cracks, and then they yell it out loud. They literally yell out loud in the courtroom that Trump ordered witness tampering, or obstruction, or interference, some version of that. And they physically collapse on the stand. They fall down. They go unconscious or nearly unconscious, right there in front of everyone. Now, here's the thing that most people miss when they hear about this. When something like this happens in court, when you've got this kind of public outburst and physical breakdown, judges take it seriously. They don't just move on. They don't dismiss it and keep going. They investigate it. Because if a witness is so traumatized that they're collapsing and screaming, that tells you something massive about the pressure involved. That tells you something about what's really at stake. That tells you there's genuine fear and trauma wrapped up in this testimony. Judge Sullivan sees this happen. He watches this witness break down completely. He hears the screaming. He sees the collapse. And he's had enough. He's reached his limit. So he stops everything immediately. He halts all the proceedings. He calls a recess. And then he does something that gets everyone's attention. He addresses Trump directly. Trump's watching on a video feed from somewhere in the White House, probably in the residence or in the West Wing somewhere, just watching his entire legal defense collapse in real time on a monitor. And Sullivan says basically, hey, Mr. President, I'm watching you right now. I can see you on this screen. And if you orchestrated this, if you gave orders to interfere with these witnesses, you're looking at life in prison. The statute he cited, come on, let me read this to you. It's 18 USC. This is federal witness tampering law. This is serious stuff. This isn't some nuance or legal grey area that lawyers can debate. This is a specific statute that has actual teeth. It says, if you interfere with a witness in a federal proceeding, you can face up to 20 years in federal prison. But if there's broader obstruction, if there's coordinated interference across multiple witnesses, if you're the architect of the entire scheme, if you're the one giving the orders, then you can face life in prison. Life. And the judge just told him that this is what's on the table. So what does Trump do? What's his response? Nothing. Nothing at all. For over 2 hours, there are 0 posts, 0 responses anywhere, 0 Truth Social rants, nothing comes out. His aides start leaking to the media that he's in some kind of catatonic state. They're using that exact word, catatonic. They're telling reporters that he's shut down mentally. People around him are panicking because what do you do when the president just goes silent after a federal judge threatens him with life imprisonment? You panic. That's what you do. You start thinking about succession planning. You start thinking about who goes down with him. You start thinking about how to protect yourself. And here's what's really important to understand about this whole situation. This silence is the complete opposite of what we've come to expect from Trump over the years. This is a guy who responds to everything immediately. A bad headline comes out, he posts about it within minutes. A negative story breaks, he's online calling it fake news within 30 minutes. A court decision goes against him, he's ranting on Truth Social instantly. But this, absolute silence for over 2 hours. That's how serious this is. When Trump goes silent like that, it means his lawyers have told him not to say anything. It means he can't defend himself. It means anything he says right now could be used against him in court. The prosecutors presented evidence in that courtroom today. They cited the Bondi memo. They cited Kash Patel's testimony. See, here's what happened that's so damaging. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, ordered certain materials to be redacted, covered up, hidden from the public record, kept secret. And the witness is now saying that those exact materials, the stuff that Bondi covered up, are the documents that prove Trump gave direct orders for witness interference. That's how they caught this connection. That's how they built the case. That's why the witness broke down and started screaming. And Kash Patel testified under oath about some of these events, but prosecutors say he lied. They say he's covering something up. They've got contradictions in his testimony. They've got evidence that shows his statements don't match the facts. So they're fast-tracking contempt charges against him too, probably. This is a cascade of legal problems. One person testifies, another person's testimony contradicts it, a third person admits to ordering redactions, and suddenly the whole house of cards unravels. Judge Sullivan watched all of this happen over the past few weeks and months. He's been watching this administration melt down in real time. He's seen Leavitt collapse. He's seen cabinet members resigning or demanding resignations. He's heard about people talking about the 25th Amendment. He's read the news about Republican senators considering removal. And then today, a witness breaks down in his courtroom and screams that Trump ordered the witness tampering. And that's when the judge decided he's had enough. He's going to make something crystal clear to everyone. He's going to make it clear to Trump. If this is proven, if the evidence holds up, we're talking about a lifetime sentence. We're not negotiating, we're not haggling, we're not looking for a deal. We're talking about life in federal prison, decades behind bars. That's what's on the table. And the president responded with silence. You know what that silence actually means? It means his lawyers told him not to say anything, because anything he says right now will be used against him in court. It means his team knows how serious this situation is. It means they're in full panic mode and damage control. It means they're probably already preparing documents and legal briefs and contingency plans for scenarios where Trump is removed from office or convicted and imprisoned. They're probably already thinking about succession. They're probably already thinking about how to distance themselves from this catastrophe. Let me know in the comments where you stand. And if you made it this far, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. We'll see you in our next video.